July 26, 2006. Mosul was still holding its breath. Staff Sergeant Evan Novak stood beside his Stryker, staring at a mission card that read like a death sentence. The math was brutal and simple. An enemy cornet team could destroy his vehicle from more than 2 miles away. Novak's weapons, .50 caliber and an Mk-19, needed to get within 1,000 meters, maybe less, to have a realistic chance. In 48 hours, one cornet crew had burned 3 coalition vehicles. 3 crews gone, 6 men dead. American doctrine said, advance by bounds, suppress likely positions, follow the book. But Novak had helped integrate these Strykers back at Fort Lewis. He knew what they could do. And as he sketched angles in his notebook that night, he saw something the manual writers had never imagined. Not a bigger gun, not thicker armor, a geometry problem, one that would turn 5-to-1 odds into something the shooters on the other side never saw coming. The Cornet's greatest strength was about to become its fatal weakness. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe for more untold stories, where the field notes and the after-action reports hide the details that mattered most. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. A couple days earlier, the assembly area south of the Tigris smelled like diesel and hot dust. Morning light flattened Mosul into plains of tan and hard edges. Evan leaned against the hull of his Stryker and tried to finish a letter to Mia. How do you tell your wife that after weeks on a line, the worst part wasn't the fighting, it was the waiting? He'd been pausing and starting for 20 minutes. The words wouldn't come right. How did you tell someone that you could spend hours staring at a rooftop and feel sure death lived behind it? He finally wrote the line he always wrote when the world felt like it might not keep turning. We've got them outnumbered. Because it was true, and because Mia needed to believe he'd be coming home. Around him, the crew moved through their morning ritual. Corporal Jamie Walsh cleaned the feed tray with the same patient precision he'd used back in Iowa, wiping every surface like he was preparing for Sunday inspection rather than another day of contact. The kid hummed something under his breath, probably a hymn his mother taught him when he was nervous. Rodriguez checked comms and antennae down to the last clip. Staff Sergeant David Chen, who'd come up through engineers and loved angles more than anything, quietly ran distances in his head. Novak could see the faces. Exhaustion carved them, but focus kept them together. Sarge, you think we'll see action today? Jamie asked without looking up from his work. Novak folded the letter and tucked it into his chest pocket next to Mia's last one. Intel says they're falling back, he said. Might be quiet. The lie came easy, because sometimes hoping was part of the job. It wasn't going to be quiet. At 700 hours, the Battalion S2 called vehicle commanders to briefing. Novak walked across the dusty assembly ground with 11 other NCOS and lieutenants, men who'd learned to read faces better than words. Nobody was joking this morning. Captain Morrison stood beside a map board, his face gray with exhaustion. He'd been here longer than any of them wanted to remember. The look in his eyes was the flat tone of a man delivering news he wished he didn't have to share. Gentlemen, he said, and the thin rain that started to patter on the canvas tent seemed to punctuate the words. We have confirmation of a Cornet cell operating in the Market District, 3 blocks west of Grid Echo 7. Call sign, Iron Ghost. The lead is an ex-Iraqi armor officer, calls himself Kareem Brandt. We've got credible reports of multiple vehicle kills in the last 48 hours. One cell destroyed 3 coalition vehicles in a single engagement. Morrison pulled down a schematic. side-by-side silhouettes of the Stryker, and a diagram of an ATGM emplacement, range arcs marked in black ink. Novak had seen these before at the brigade maintenance briefings. Seeing the same shapes 3 miles from where the missile waited made the numbers feel different. The Cornet's effective engagement range can exceed 3,000 meters with thermal acquisition, Morrison said. Their tandem warhead can defeat side armor at engagement ranges over 1,000 meters under a variety of conditions. You'll need to close to under 1,000 to get a real shot, and even then, you'll need perfect geometry and luck. Doctrine says suppress with smoke, tie down with overwatch, move in line. We don't change horses midstream. He let that line hang. A colonel's stamp at the bottom of a memo can turn reluctance into policy. Evan Novak did the arithmetic the way he used to calculate production quotas back at Fort Lewis. The Cornet could kill from 2 miles. The Stryker needed to push into a zone that was practically hand-to-hand to have a chance. 5 Strykers for every Cornet looked good on a logistics slide. It looked less good when you sat inside one and knew you were designed to be expendable. Jamie raised his hand. Sarge, what if we don't go head-on? Morrison's jaw tightened. You follow doctrine, Corporal. Doctrine says suppress, advance in line, and concentrate fire dismissed. The vehicle commanders filed out into the rain. Novak gathered his crew and looked at each face, Jamie with a folded page tucked in his pocket like a talisman, Rodriguez checking his watch, Chen already calculating approach angles. If we do this by the book, he said quietly, we're dead. But if we don't, we're court-martialed. He touched the letter in his chest pocket. Mia's handwriting through the fabric. He'd promised her he'd come home, but Doctrine wasn't going to keep that promise. Somewhere in the market district, a man with a cornet was waiting. The American column moved into the warren of streets in disciplined formation. 5 Strykers, spaced at intervals the manual prescribed, advanced through narrow alleys and over broken pavement. Rooftops and choke points framed the lanes, visibility often measured in the length of a courtyard. The lead vehicle rounded a corner, and Novak heard the sound before he saw the effect. Not like artillery. Cleaner, sharper, the signature crack of a missile system. Then the explosion. Rawhide 1 simply ceased to be. The crew compartment tore open, fuel and stowage cooking off in a bloom of flame. The radios went to static. Men screamed. The world split into before and after. Novak slammed the Stryker into reverse and the vehicle lurched back into a sunken lane, engine roaring. Through the vision ports, he searched for the source and found only smoke and ruined hulks. Jamie's voice shook. Sarge, I can't see him. Where is he? I don't know, Evan said. But he sees us. Running would only expose their thinner flank. The Cornet had already made frontal approach dangerous from ranges once considered irrelevant. The enemy had chosen the ground and the time. A few hundred meters away, in a position chosen for concealment and fields of fire, Kareem Brandt watched through a thermal array. He'd been an armor officer once, trained to understand ranges and angles. Now he bought systems that let a man decide life and death without showing his face. He'd set up in a narrow compound, so only the launcher and a few hands were visible, with clear sight lines down 3 approach lanes. Through glass and heat signature, he watched tracers arc and impacts bloom, another vehicle erupting in flame. Clean kills, professional. He reloaded by reflex, counting tubes because each round and each shot was precious with supply lines stretched and an opponent that kept adapting. In the sunken lane, Novak pressed his back to the hatch wall. His crew was silent. Jamie's hands trembled on the controls. Over the net, other units called for support, reported contact, asked permission to withdraw. "We can't fight that," Jamie whispered. Novak pulled out a map and studied the urban geometry, the alleys, the approach corridors, the roof lines. His brain fell into the pattern it knew. Production lines, bottlenecks, throughput. There had to be a solution. There was always a solution. You just had to change the math. That night he sat in a damp tent with a headlamp and sketched by flashlight. Not the frontal assault doctrine demanded, but something else entirely. The cornet was deadly frontally, but the launcher had to be set up. The operator needed a line of sight and a finite traverse. Strykers were mobile. What if 3 vehicles came from different angles at once? What if, instead of feeding the cornet a single target, they forced it to choose? He drew vectors until the ink ran low. 3 attackers converging on 1 defended point. 1 pins frontally, while 2 offset at 30 and 60 degrees. The launcher must choose which lane to cover. It cannot watch all 3 at once. If timing was synchronized and smoke obscured a primary sight, a shooter's perfect acquisition could become a liability. At battalion headquarters, Captain Morrison sat with casualty reports spread on the desk, lamp smoke cutting hard shadows. "Sir, I need 5 minutes," Novak said. Morrison looked up, gray and tired. "Sergeant Novak, it's 3 in the morning." "I know, sir, but I think I know how to kill Iron Ghost," Novak said. He spread his sketches, approach routes, timing marks, radio call sequences, and explained fast. A frontal pin with smoke to force the cornet to engage obscured sensors. 2 flanking elements converging within 60 seconds using synchronized time hacks. Designated rooftop teams to mark decoy signatures with IR lasers. Drone eyes to confirm movement. Change the geometry. Turn sight into a hazard. The cornet's side profile and the time it takes to relocate. Those were numbers an engineer could stack and exploit. Morrison weighed the tactical and political risks, the kind that put names on casualty reports. "That's not doctrine, Sergeant. You break formation, you lose coordination. You'll get lost in these alleys and hit each other with crossfire." Novak answered in the plain language of someone who had fixed bottlenecks 1,000 times on a factory floor. "Sir, the cornet crew has to set up and acquire. Their traverse and reset times are finite. Our vehicle is faster and can reposition. If one of us arrives early, we're dead. If we arrive together, we make him choose. We just need speed and angles." The captain rubbed his eyes and finally nodded. "You get 1 chance. 3 elements. Rawhide 2, Rawhide 4, Rawhide 5. Synchronized attack at first light. If you're wrong, those 9 men are on you." Before dawn, Novak found Lieutenant Chen and Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. Chen was awake, cleaning a sight by the light of a small candle. Rodriguez folded a letter and tucked it away. Novak spread the sketches on a footlocker and walked through the plan. "We're calling it Texas Two-Step. Miguel, you push the frontal lane and lay smoke at 200 meters. David and I flank from parallel routes at speed. We hit from 3 directions within 60 seconds. He can only face one way at a time." Chen traced the routes with a finger. "Timing has to be perfect. If we arrive early, the cornet picks us off. That's why we synchronize watches and use radio time hacks every 30 seconds, Novak said. "We stay coordinated." Rodriguez folded his letter, looked at his men, and nodded. They planned through the night. Frequencies, timing marks, fallback positions, fields of fire. Jamie sat quietly in the corner, sketching the triangle in the margins of his helmet log. 3 small vehicles closing on 1 defended point. The impossible geometry that might save a crew. On the other side of the district, Brant watched the pre-dawn and noticed probes coming in on multiple axes the day before. The Americans were learning. That made them dangerous. He was low on diesel for his auxiliary blower and had a finite number of tubes. He could move once, twice maybe. The advantage narrowed. At first light, Novak stood beside Lucky Strike, watching the crew load belts and rounds. Engines idled. Jamie was pale but steady now. The boy's nerves had thinned into a new kind of focus. Novak keyed the net. Rawhide 4, Rawhide 5, this is Rawhide 2. Remember, speed and angles. Hit him where he isn't looking. Execute 3 strikers moved like the points of a closing triangle. Engines snarling, converging on the suspected position. Rodriguez's voice crackled. Rawhide 5, frontal approach, smoke out. White phosphorus through a wall of gray that billowed across the compound and washed the Cornet's sensors with particulate. Brant cursed softly and fired blind. The first shot missed wide. 45 seconds remained. The window Novak had promised. Driver, maintain speed. Gunner, prepare target left 600 meters, Novak told himself to breathe. They popped through a gap in a collapsed wall at the right offset, and Novak saw the launch tube in the shadow and the hunched silhouette behind it. He ordered fire. The .50 chewed at the parapet, but the shooter ducked. Simultaneously, Chen's flank erupted on the opposite side and placed a round at the launcher's support, severing a brace. The cradle jerked. The Cornet lost stability. Rodriguez came up the middle and sprayed with an airburst, concrete shrapnel chiseling the ground. In 15 seconds, the position was neutralized. A tube smoked and rolled. Men spilled from hiding places. The block belonged to them. Brant understood in a single cold breath what had happened. They'd changed the geometry. He tried to pivot the tube and realign, but 3 vehicles closing at speed had turned his sightline into a set of impossible choices. Human reaction time and the heavy mechanics of repositioning betrayed his advantage. He had to choose, and the math was against him. Novak dropped from the hatch and moved across smoking rubble with his pistol lowered. He walked up to the captured man, uniform a scramble of old and new, and asked in clipped Arabic, then in accented English, "How many teams?" Brant looked at him and answered plainly, 2 more. Maybe 3. His voice had the flat tone of a man who measured distances for a living. "Then help us," Novak said. "You can tell us how to kill them, or you can be our prisoner." Your call. Brant stared at the ruined vehicles, the smoke curling into the morning, and considered the calculus. "I will help," he said finally. "Not because I betray my people, but because watching brave men die from bad doctrine, American or Iraqi, is not engineering. It is murder." They used Brant's knowledge. He drew on Novak's map like a professor teaching a problem set. Ambush sites, likely fallback positions, roof routes, the places where he would have placed decoys. He pointed to coordinates, tapped times. He will stage hull down with overlapping fields of fire. Side armor is thin in X configuration. At 800 meters, a clean shot can be fatal. Turret traverse is slow when you've dug in and used restraining supports. Give me a drone to spot, and I'll show you where he hides. They moved fast. Brant rode in a captured vehicle beside Novak, hands zip-tied, but watching terrain with the clinical eye of an engineer. The ride was loud, engine roar and track clank, radio nets full of frantic contact reports. Brant leaned over the map and spoke in calm, technical terms. "If I were commanding that launcher, I'd hide here. High ground, 3 approach lanes, a marketplace for concealment." It was disconcertingly precise. At the next engagement zone, Rawhide 6 was a smoking wreck, turret gone. Rawhide 7 limped away damaged. Novak keyed his net. Rawhide 7, this is Rawhide 2. Execute Texas two-step. I'll pin frontally with smoke. You flank from the east access road. The reply came shaky but willing. Brant called ranges and angles as they advanced. 1,200 meters, load smoke. When you fire, he will pivot. 45 seconds, he said, is your window. They threw the smoke and Novak pushed Lucky Strike forward aggressively, drawing the Cornet's attention while Chen and the other element raced down parallel routes. The attack unfolded as planned. Rawhide 7 struck the rear armor at 550 meters. Engine shots disabled mobility. The crew bailed, hands raised. Tactical defeat mirrored the one Brant had just suffered. As MPs secured the prisoners, a new silhouette rolled into the clearing, a different shape, longer tube, a British ferret or a 120 variant that filled Novak with a small, grim satisfaction. Lieutenant Powell climbed down, clapped Novak on the shoulder. Bloody brilliant flanking, Yank, but soon you won't need the fancy footwork. This kit will kill an armored target frontally at 1,000 meters. One shot through. Mass production's coming. Novak looked at the longer tube and then at Brant, who nodded slowly, understanding. Good ideas become doctrine, Brant said simply. As the prisoners were marched off, Brant turned back to Novak. You said Detroit, he said in halting English. Fort Lewis, Novak corrected with a half-smile. Same factory floor instincts. My factory was Henschel in Kassel, Brant replied. We both built machines of war. Perhaps after this, He didn't finish, but Novak understood. They shook hands, briefly. Two men who'd spent the morning rewriting the mathematics of survival. Jamie watched, his folded page still tucked in a pocket. 3 months later, Texas Two-Step appeared as an annex in U.S. Armored Doctrine for urban anti-armor threats. Tactical lesson sets printed a one-page flow. Multi-axis approach, smoke first, synchronized time hacks, roof teams, and drone confirmation. Vehicle kits evolved. Additional slat armor in vulnerable sectors, improved suppressive fire drills, and more integrated ISR to spot emplaced launchers. Brant's sketches, side-by-side diagrams of tubes and later bridge forms and cranes, moved through intelligence channels. He'd taught them how to defeat his own kit because in the end, the engineer in him could not celebrate the machine's marriage to death. Novak sat in his tent that night and wrote to Mia, "Today I learned something the press never taught. Wars aren't won by the best machines, but by the best thinking. And sometimes enemies can teach you how to live long enough to learn." He folded Jamie's crude triangle from the helmet log into the margin of his note. 3 arrows closing on a hub, simple geometry that had changed everything. The impossible idea had not become perfect. It had become understood. Once understood, it could be taught. When headquarters printed the updated TTP, one line stood in bold. Change the geometry. Change the outcome. The men Novak led kept that phrase in their lockers like a prayer. Doctrine, for a while, pulsed where the front line had taught it. Numbers could be argued. Craft could be taught. Survival could be designed if you were willing to redraw the lines. And in the quiet hours when Mosul smoked at the edges and the moon washed the rubble in flat silver, Evan Novak would walk the maintenance bay and run his hand along the hull of Lucky Strike and think of the 2 men who met in the dust. One who built protective steel and one who built the devices that could defeat it. 2 engineers who finally understood that war is not only about metal and fuses, but about the way a mind can tilt an angle with a pencil and save a crew. He kept the triangle, he kept Mia's letters, and he kept the memory of the morning when doctrine had failed and geometry had lived up to its promise. The math mattered. The men mattered more.